Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's daf, which is Eruvin Daf Chaf Beis. We're on Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. Middle of the line, Kvutzoisav Taltala. This is a pasuk in Shir Shirim. Kvutzoisav, his locks of hair, Taltala Mawevi. What does this mean? Omar Chizda, Omar Maruk. Malarme, this teaches us. Shish Lidresh, Al Kol Koitz V'Koitz. On every koitz, koitz means literally a thorn, here means the stroke, that line that's atop the letters in the Sefer Torah. Every one of them has meaning. On every one of them, you can be doirish, tile tilim, piles and piles, layers upon layers, shel halachos, which are embedded in these strokes. The pasuk includes shchoiros ka'orev, they're black like a raven. So what does this mean? B'mi'ata moitzon. Within who, which person, will you find this depth of Torah, which is just mentioned earlier? It is found by a person that is Moshe Nefesh for Torah. So Shchoris will mean Shachris, he gets up early for Torah. K'orev, Orev he'll mean Arvis, he stays late to learn. B'misha mashkim umar v'aleim beis hamedrash, one who gets up early, stays late for the sake of Torah, lebeis hamedrash. Rabba Amar, Shchoris K'orev means black like a raven. B'misha mashchir panav, alein k'orev, one who blackens his face for the sake of Torah like a black raven. So he exhausts himself, expends a great deal of energy and effort. He blackens his face for the sake of learning Torah. Rav Amar, b'mishim esim atzmei achzori, one who presents himself like a cruel person. Al bonav v'abnei veisei ka'orev, like a raven. Chazal tell us that Hashem supplies the offspring of the orev, gives them the sustenance because the orev doesn't really take care of them. So a person is not meant to get overly preoccupied and distract himself in order to sustain his family at the expense of his commitment to Torah. Kiha, as we see in the following story, the Rav Ada bar Masna, so he was going to the yeshiva, his wife called out to him, Yenuki didach, your youngsters, my avlu, what am I going to do for them? How am I going to feed them? Amrullah, so he responded, Mishlimu kurmi ba'agma, have the vegetables in the swamp been depleted? You can go ahead and supply them with that. So the point here is obviously that there is some form of sustenance, but one is not meant to be overly distracted and divert his attention from his commitment to Torah, and that's how he's going to be zoicha to the highest level of learning. Continues the Gemara, Mishalem l'soinov, El panav lavida. Hashem repays his enemies, gives them their reward, El panav, in front of his face, lahavidoi, in order to destroy them. Not for the fact that the pasuk itself says it, it wouldn't be possible to say it. It's as though as though a person who's carrying a load on his face. It's a burden. He wants to unload that burden. He would like to cast off that masoi, that burden from himself. So here as well, Hashem repays the Rishayim. It's like a burden. He wants to repay them off, pay them off what they deserve, their schar. It's like a masoi, it's like a burden that Hashem wants to unload, pay them back, and give them their schar in this world. Lo ya'acher l'soinai. Hashem will not delay the payment for his enemies. Amar b'ila l'soinav hud lo ya'acher. Indeed, Hashem doesn't delay provision of reward to his enemies, to the Rishayim. Hashem pays them back immediately in this world. Aval ya'acher l'tzadikim g'murim. Hashem does delay the payment of schar for tzadikim g'murim. Hashem waits until the right time comes, until he can give them the real, true, meaningful, eternal reward. V'hainu d'amar Shimon Levi. What does the pasuk mean? Asher noichi mitzavcha hayom la'asosim, which I mean mitzav you today to do them. We learn from there hayom la'asosim, v'lo l'machal la'asosim. The time to fulfill Torah mitzvahs is today, in this world. However, tomorrow will be too late. It's not a time for doing any longer. Today is a time of doing. Tomorrow, that's the time to accept payment, to receive reward. So tzaddikim are heavily involved in doing Torah mitzvahs in this world, but they don't see the fruit of their labor necessarily. They don't see the reward that's waiting. What does the following pasuk mean? Erech apayim. Hashem has patience. He prolongs his anger, meaning he has patience. He doesn't express his anger immediately. Why does it say erech apayim, which is a plural term, Lashon Rabbi, referring to two things? Erech af meboile. Pasuk should have said, Hashem prolongs his anger, he delays his anger, he's patient. Ella, it's referring to two things, two expressions. Ella erech apayim letzadik. Hashem delays that expression of goodwill that is meant for the tzaddikim. He waits with that, he reserves it to us and love it. Erech hapayim, and conversely, Hashem delays the erech hapayim, the expression of anger, of punishment, lo rishayim. With that, he waits until the next world. But in this world, he grants them goodness as a reward for their mitzvahs. Let's take a look at Rashi, 11 lines from the top. Apayim, mashma ponim. It's an expression. Bein soichakois bein zumais. It's a facial expression. It could either mean of goodwill, of happiness, bein zumais, of anger. Apayim soichakois. The expression, the facial expression of happiness, of goodwill. Marich uma'achal tzaddikim laslov. Hashem delays that. He waits. He doesn't express it. Tzaddikim wait till asad love it. And that angry face, marach l'rishayim. When it comes to that, he delays for the rishayim, and delays their punishment, their piranus, till olam haba. So it works both ways. When it comes to rishayim, he gives them a good time in this world, but the anger Hashem reserves for the next world. When it comes to tzaddikim, it's just the opposite. Hashem gives them a hard time in this world to cleanse them, to prepare them for the true goodness of the panim seichakos, that pleasant expression, that goodwill and schar, which they're going to receive l'asad love. Continues the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ad beis hasayim. The Yehuda maintains that the maximum area that you can enclose with these boards is up until 2 sa, because he maintains that it's not considered to be a residential enclosure. This is limited at 2 sa, like the Chatzar Mishkan, which was 150 amas, which was also a non-residential enclosure. And up until this shear, it still has that personal flavor to it. It's considered to be designated for personal use, and one can carry throughout this area. But if it's larger than that, that resembles a large, open, unenclosed area like a carmelis, with the Rabbanah, you cannot carry through it. It says in Yiboilu, they ask the following question. When Yehuda gives us a maximum shear of 2 sa, what do he mean? Boir upasen kamar? Does he mean to include the boir, the water pit, with the pasan, the empty space from the pit till the boards? Is that what's meant to be included in the 2 sa? As we know, that aside from the pit itself, you must leave some space on each side. As we learned, it needs to be 2 ames to allow the animal to get in there. So when we reckon 2 sa, do we reckon both together? The boir with the pasan total 2 sa? Or dilma, perhaps, boir v'loy pasan kamar. When Yehuda set the limit at 2 sa, he meant the size of the boir can't be larger than 2 sa. But you could add on top of that the space next to the boir, because that's not really its own separate area. That's servicing the boir. It's a usage area for the boir. So it's bottled to the boir. It doesn't really add to the total value and area space of this enclosure. So those are the 2 sides of the coin. Do we include just the boir, or also the boir and the pasan are meant to be reckoned in the number? Says the Gemara. Now, what would be the basis for either approach? Says the Gemara, one side of the coin would say, well, when we speak about 2 sa, it's the size of the boir that we're speaking about. Adam noisen ein of a boir. Because when a person takes a look at this area, he says, well, look, how large an area is this? It's a makim shaloi hukaf l'dira. It's not enclosed for residential purposes. It must be up until 2 sa, according to Yehuda. So what does he focus on? What does he measure? He measures the boir. Okay, let's see how large the boir is. Adam noisen ein of a boir. Therefore, there's no room for concern that if you allow a bit more on the side of the boir, those 2 ames, that this might lead to mistakes. Might lead to a person saying, well, look, you see, you could enclose even an area greater than 2 sa. No, he won't come to that mistake because he's going to focus on the boir. He'll realize perhaps that the area next to the boir, that 2 amma, it's just bottled to the boir. It's there merely as a ridge to serve as the boir. but the actual area is really only 2 sa. Therefore, he won't come to allow enclosing an area which is greater than 2 sa. That's one side of the coin. So according to this approach, the bar itself can have an area space of 2 sa, in addition to the area next to it. We're not concerned that as a result of allowing a bit more than 2 sa, allowing that additional space next to the bar, the person may come to be metaltal in an area, an enclosed area which is greater than 2 sa in a karfif, which is a storage area, non-residential area. He won't come to do that because he'll say, well, this place is an enclosure of 2 sa. Look at the bar. The bar is 2 sa. Or perhaps, when a person takes a look at this area, he doesn't necessarily focus on the bar. He's not such a Talmud Chacham. He says, look, what's the total space? It's more than 2 sa. The bar is 2 sa, and you have, in addition, the area next to it. So look, you enclose even a greater area than 2 sa. As a result of that, we're concerned, this might lead to confusion. And you might go ahead and carry, as a result of this, in a Yosim base assigned Bekarfif. You might say, well, if you can enclose, in this case, an area greater than 2 sa, because the bar is 2 sa, plus you have the area around it. So apparently you can carry in a karfif, a storage area, a non-residential enclosure, even if it's greater than 2 sa. This is more Tashma. Let's bring a raya from the following brayse. How close to the bar must they place the boards to allow the head and most of the body of the para inside that enclosure, which we know as being 2 amis. How far away from the bar can you position those posts? Even an area as great as a kur, you can plant a kur which is 30 soft seeds, or 2 kur. That's okay. Because according to Rabbanan, this water is fit for human consumption. It's a makim shehukaf ledira. It's considered to be a residential enclosure without any limit of area or size. Rabbi Yudaim, beis asayim mutar. If the area contains 2 sa, that's okay. Yasam beis asayim, but if it's larger than that, asur. He regards it as a non-residential enclosure. Amalei Rabbi Yudah. So they responded to Rabbi Yudah. Do you not agree? When it comes to a deer, bidir v'sar, these are types of animal corrals, pens, muktzah, a backyard, v'chatzer, front yard, afilu bas chameshes kur, afilu beis chameshes kur. Even if it's an area which encloses 5 kur, or beis aseres kur, or 10 kur, shemuter. There's no concern there. So why is this different? Amar lahen, there's a big difference. Zu mechitza. The examples that you cited are examples of proper mechitzas. Elu pasen. Over here by the be'er, which is being encircled, these are merely pasen. These are incomplete, partial mechitzas, just boards with large space in between. It's not constructed like a residential enclosure. It does not have that halacha. So we're limited with 2 sa. If the bar is sized in the following manner, it is 2 sa long by 2 sa wide, you can go ahead and use this area. In addition to that, in addition to the bar itself, which is 2 sa by 2 sa, you may go ahead and be marching those boards another little bit to allow the animal in there, which is 2 sa. So it's very clear that according to him, Rosh Hashanah, the bar itself is 2 sa, and you can add to that the space next to it for a total of a bit more than 2 sa. Says the Muhammad Amar Rav Shimon Lazar, bar v'lei pasen. Apparently, since Rav Shimon Lazar tells us that the bar itself encompasses 2 sa, in addition to the pasen, meaning you can add to that additional space alongside the bar, and there's no concern. Mechlal Rabbi Yehuda, bar pasen ka'amar. Apparently, Shimon Lazar is coming to disagree with somebody. It would appear that Rabbi Yehuda, who's the Shita early in the Brisa, disagrees with this concept. He holds bar pasen ka'amar. What he means is that the bar and the pasen together, the pit with the area alongside, must equal no more than 2 sa. So apparently we have clarity on our question. Rabbi Yehuda maintains that the entire area combined, the pit and the ridge, will total 2 sa. Because otherwise, what is the point of contention, of disagreement between Rabbi Yehuda and Shimon Lazar? Not necessarily so. Rabbi Yehuda b'lei pasen ka'amar. Rabbi Yehuda indeed holds in this aspect exactly like Shimon Lazar, that the bar itself, without the area next to it, equals 2 sa. On top of that, you could add the space alongside the bar. If so, Rabbi Yehuda's shita is exactly like Rav Shimon Lazar. How are they having a machlekes? You know what the nafkamina will be? You know what their machlekes will pertain to? Orich v'katan. Let's say the bar is long and narrow. It's 100 amas by 50. Rabbi Yehuda will say that's fine, as long as the total square area doesn't exceed 2 sa, which is 100 by 50. Whereas Rav Shimon Lazar, who specifically said that the ba'er is beis hosayim al beis hosayim, which implies that it's exactly square, he will hold that this non-residential enclosure needs to be formed as a square specifically. We're going to learn this Mez Hashem in the next daf, Naf Chav Gimel. This is based on how we learned from the Chatzar Mishkan. In any case, this will be the point of machlekes here. But certainly, even Rabbi Yehuda can very well hold that the bar itself can encompass 2 sa. In addition, you can have some space alongside the bar for the animal to come access the pit. Continues the brayso. Klal Omar Rav Shimon Lazar. Kol aver shetashmish ladir. Whenever you have an aver, which is referring to an open, unroofed area, shetashmish ladir, which is serving as a residential area, a proper dir, kigoin dir, vesar, these pens, muktzah, backyard, v'chatzar, front yard, afilu beis chameshes kurim, ubeis aseres kurim, mutter. Even if it's a very large area, it's okay, because the makam shehukaf ladir, it's been enclosed for the sake of living in there, has a residential halacha to it. So even if it's unroofed and open, that's okay. V'chol dira, shetashmish la'aver, and conversely, if you have a dira, a roofed, a covered area, the problem here is that the designated function of this enclosure is not for residential purpose. And this tashmish al-aver is serving aver, like these huts, these roofed huts sitting out in the fields, which are meant for the guards to sit in there to keep an eye on the field, which is an aver, which is an unenclosed area, which is an open space, which is a non-residential area. So this area as well, this hut, despite the fact that it's covered, it appears like a house. It's serving a non-residential area. Therefore, it itself has that same din. Therefore, we have a limit, beis hosayim mutter, up until 2 sa in size, you can carry within it. Yosem beis hosayim, if it's larger than 2 sa, asur, you cannot carry within it, because it is not a residential enclosure, and therefore we limit it to 2 sa. Let's take a look at Rashi inside, 11 lines from the bottom. Kol aver, aval b'she'eni mekur, even if it's an unroofed area, that's why it's called aver. Im tashmishel diras adam, if its use is for diras adam, the knisel tziyat tamid, who comes in and out constantly, so it's serving a residential purpose, then we have no limit on its size. However, v'chol dira, shi mechusa begag, but if you have a place which is actually closed up, roofed with a gag, if you have suya l'shmiras, aver shechutzla, but what's the intended purpose of this hut? So somebody could sit in there and watch the avir, the field, which is right outside it. That's called a non-residential enclosure, and therefore we're limited at 2 sa and no larger than that. So in summary, regarding the area which is enclosed by the pasi berois, Rabbanan maintain could be as large as you want, even 10 kur. According to Shimon Lazar, the bar must be no larger than 2 sa long by 2 sa wide, needs to be square. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the bar can be 2 sa even long and narrow. Now regarding our question whether the beis sa'ah is describing the size of the bar itself, but you can add some more to that by adding some ridge around the bar, or perhaps the bar and the ridge around it, which is called a pasan, must total 2 sa. According to Shimon Lazar, it's pretty clear. The bar itself can already have 2 sa, plus the area around it. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the Gemara leaves it unresolved. Continues the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im hoya derech r'shesaram afsakasim. So we have these posts around the be'er. What happened was, the derech r'shesaravim was intersecting, was going right through these boards. Yisal kenel etzdaden. He must divert it to the side, because the rabbim who are accessing through these mechitzas, through these boards, are going to destroy these mechitzas, going to negate the mechitzas, make them batal. They will no longer be considered shayachid. There's no need. He doesn't have to push the traffic to the side. According to Rabbanan, the mechitzas are so powerful and they can prevail even in the face of public pedestrian traffic. Continues the Gemara, Rabbi Yechon, Rabbi Elazar, Dam Tavai. So they both commented as follows: Kan, in this halacha that we see that the mechitza is actually stronger, superior than the rabbim walking through it. Kan hoidiacha koichan shel mechitzas. Here, the Tana has informed you the strength, the power of mechitzas that will prevail even in face of traffic. Says more Kan severely. Here you've been informed, and they hold of it. Meaning, does Rabbi Yechon really hold of this concept? Does he agree with it? Kan usvirle, does he hold of it as well? That the mechitza can sustain itself in the face of traffic? We find that Rabbi Yechon himself seems not to hold of this var. Va'amar Rabba bar Rachana or Yechon. Yerushalayim. So the city of Yerushalayim, which was surrounded by a chayma and doors, and it had the rabbim, had 600,000 people, it was just a rabbim. So Rabbi Yechon told us, if not for the fact that its doors would be closed at night, so the doors were used on a regular basis, which create that proper enclosure, if not for that, what would be chayiv in Yerushalayim on account of Shus Rabim? Meaning, it would be considered Shus Rabim, despite the fact that it's surrounded with mechitzis. So we see that the Rabim negate mechitzis. The power of the Shus Rabim is superior, stronger than mechitzas. Apparently, Rabbi Yechon himself does not agree with this concept that mechitzas are stronger than the Rabim. Ella rather Kan, indeed, he made this statement. Kan, over here we see this halacha, but that's the Rabban's opinion. I don't agree with it. V'lei he himself did not agree with this. He held that the Rabim will negate the mechitzas. Says the Gemara, we seem to have a contradiction. We have Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah tells us that the Rabim are powerful, more powerful than the mechitzas, whereas Rabbanan maintain the mechitzas have the upper hand. We have a stira from where we find a brisa where it seems that Rabbi Yehuda holds that the mechitzas are stronger and the Rabbanan hold the Ram are stronger. V'rami, the Rabbi Yehuda. Let's ask a stira, a contradiction from the Rabbi Yehuda over here to Rabbi Yehuda elsewhere. V'rami, the Rabbanan, ad Rabbanan, from the Rabbanan here and Rabbanan elsewhere. The Sanya, Yosar Kenam Rabbi Yehuda. Furthermore, Rabbi Yehuda said, if we have two houses, one on either side, other Shesrabim, so you have machitza on one side, machitza on the other. So in order to carry within this enclosure between these two machitzas, very simple, says Rabbi Yehuda, he places a lechi on one side of the house, a lechi on the other side. So for instance, you have the Rosh Hashanah and you have the two houses, which create two mechitzas. So in order to carry in this area, he places a lechi here, which creates this enclosure, a lechi here, which completes the enclosure, or a koyer on either side. Or you koyer mekan, or koyer mekan, v'noisev nesim emtza, and he can freely carry in the middle. So apparently, according to Rabbi Yehuda, despite the fact that there's public traffic going right through here, there's no concern, because we have mechitzas. Amr loy, the Rabbanan responded, Ein ma'arvin shesram b'kach. We cannot allow carrying shesram in this manner. So apparently they hold, it's because the rabbim will negate the mechitzas. So here we have Rabbi Yehuda saying the mechitzas are strong, in contrast with our Mishnah, which seems to say the rabbim are strong. Here we have the Rabbanan, who are telling us that the rabbim are more powerful, whereas in the Mishnah they maintain the mechitzas, gain the upper hand. Kasha, the Rabbi Yehuda, we have a kasha from one Rabbi Yehuda on the other, kasha the Rabbanon ad Rabban. Says the Gemara, when you really have a properly enclosed Rosh Hashanah and properly constructed mechitzas, perhaps all agree that mechitzas can withstand even public traffic. The question is, what constitutes a properly constructed mechitza and a properly enclosed shayachet? And that is the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabban. Explains the Gemara. The Rabbi Yehuda like kasha. There's no kasha from one Rabbi Yehuda on the other. Why? Depends on the situation. Hasam over there, when we have the Rosh Hashanah, which is crossing in between two buildings, which create a mechitza on either side of that street. The reason why Rabbi Yehuda considers that to be a proper shayachet The ikka shtei mechitzas ma'alisa, because we have two properly built mechitzas. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that makes Rosh Hashanah. He requires merely two mechitzas. Therefore, even though there's Rabban walking there, Rosh Hashanah, which was created through proper mechitzas, does not become batal through a Rabban. Hacha, as opposed to the case of the Pasei Berois. So although it's also Rosh Hashanah, but let's keep in mind, these mechitzas aren't complete mechitzas. You have a post on this side, a post on that corner. It's not a complete mechitzah. Therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says, the Rabbim who are walking through these mechitzas will be mevatel these mechitzas. Hacha over here, leka, shtei mechitzas ma'alisa. You don't have two properly constructed mechitzas. Therefore, the Rabbim can be mevatel the mechitzah. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, how many mechitzas make a Rosh Hashanah? You only need two mechitzas. When it comes to resisting the public pressure, the public walkthrough, for that you need proper mechitzas. So Pasei Berois, according to Rabbi Yehuda, are not proper mechitzas, and therefore cannot withstand the rabbin that are walking through it. Continues the Gemara, the Rabbanan nami lekasha. Likewise, there will not be a kasha from one rabban or the other. The Rabbanan maintain, number one, what makes a Rosh Hashanah? You need at least three mechitzas. Three proper mechitzas, or in the case of the Pasei Berois, that's also enough because we have shem dal mechitzas. We have that configuration of four mechitzas. We have four corners. That is also considered to be a proper shayachit. Says the Gemara, like Kasha Hacha over here in the Pasei Berois, Ika shem arba mechitzas. We have that shem arba mechitzas. We have that structure of four mechitzas. Therefore, the area here is considered to be a shayachit and can resist even the derech harabim that are walking through it, because it's a proper sayachet. You know why? In the case over there by the street, in between those houses, you cannot carry hasam leka shem dal mechitzas. You don't even have the shem dal mechitzas. Therefore, according to Rabbanan, it's not a sayachet to begin with. They require either three full mechitzas or at least shem dalad mechitzas. So number one, they require the amount of mechitzas that are required to make sayachet is either three or shem dalad mechitzas. Now, once you have a properly enclosed sayachet, even if it's merely through posts, which create a shendal mechitzah, Rabbanan maintain that mechitzah are stronger than the rabbim that are accessing through it. So in summary, we have two discussions here. Number one, what makes a sayachet to begin with? According to Rabbi Yehuda, two mechitzas. According to Rabbanan, you need three. All agree. Pasei Berois work because they are shendal mechitzas. Second question, when a rabbim are coming through mechitzas, are they mevatel the mechitzas? So generally speaking, not, if you have proper mechitzas. Or if you have shem dal mechitzas, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's not considered to be properly constructed mechitzas, and they cannot resist the rabbim that are walking through it. Whereas the Rabbanan maintain, any Rosh Hashanah, whether full mechitzas or even shem dal mechitzas, they can resist the rabbim, and they maintain, they hold their firm ground, even in face of the rabbim that are walking through it. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Eretz Yisrael ein chayav and oleh mishum reshus harabim. There's no chiv reshus harabim in Eretz Yisrael. Reshus harabim doesn't exist inside Eretz Yisrael. Yosef Rav Dimi, v'ka'amar lei lahashmaita. So Rav Dimi was sitting and saying over this halacha named Rav Yochanan. Amar lei abayi Rav Dimi. My timer. What is the basis of this tremendous chiddush that Eretz Yisrael does not contain any reshus harabim? Ilema is the reason mishum. Because the makifla summa de tzur, because the summa, this tall mountain, steep mountain of tzur, surrounds Eretz Yisrael. It's close to Eretz Yisrael on its north side. The makifla summa de tzur machisa. So summa de tzur is makifla, means that it surrounds it or it's next to it, mehachkisa, on the north side. So that creates a mechitza. Umachtana de Goder Machis, and you have the steep canyon of Goder on the other side, on the east side. And both these are considered to be mechitzas, and they meet together like an L, perhaps. They create a shayachit in between them, and therefore the entire Yisrael is considered shayachit. Is that the reason? If that's the case, as Abai Babel Nami, so why strictly Eretz Yisrael? Babel also has a similar phenomenon. Makiv lo pras machis. We have the river Pras on one side, which has a riverbed which is steep and it has a mechitza. V'diglas mehagisa. On the other side, you have the river Diglas, which has that riverbed, which is a steep mechitza. So Bavel is also not a Rishus Harabim. And if that's the case, the Kol Yalma Navi, the whole world also. Ma'akiv. We have the huge ocean, Atlantic, Pacific, which have sea walls. And I consider the Rechitza. So the entire world cannot have Rishus Harabim. Is that the case? Sounds pretty surprising. So Abaye says, perhaps I can suggest that Rabbi Yechon didn't mean the entire Yisrael. Dilma, perhaps, Malus Umordis Ka'amis. You mean to say that the Malus, these steep hills, Umordis, the downhills, the steep downhill, which are not conveniently accessed areas, Ka'amis, perhaps that's what you're speaking about. The hills and the valleys. That's not considered Rishus Harabim because it's not a convenient passageway. So this was Abaye's suggestion. Later, Rav Dimi responded, yes indeed. Karkafna literally means Bala Gulgoyos, Rashi says, the one of the skull. It means a Lashon Chashav. It's a term which denotes importance. Chazite l'reishach be'amudi. I noticed your head between the beams of the Beis Medrash of Rabbi Yechanan. Ki am Rabbi Yechanan shmaita. When Rabbi Yechanan said this halacha, meaning it sounds like you were there, that you were able to get down to the bottom of this statement and clarify it. Because indeed this is the true meaning of Rabbi Yechanan's halacha. He didn't mean the entire Yisrael, he meant those steep hills, due to the fact that they don't really present a convenient passageway. Itmer Nami, we learned likewise, Eruvin. When Eruvin came, indeed, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, he said this thing in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. Some say it was Amar Avo Rabbi Yechanan, that the Malus and Mordis Eretz Yisrael, the steep hills and inclines of Eretz Yisrael, Ein Chayav Aleim Rishus Harabim, they're exempt from Rishus Harabim, L'fisha Einu Kediglei Midbar, because they don't resemble the encampment of the Midbar, which serves as the source of the halachas of Shabbos. And since the Rishus Harabim there was comprised of flat ground, which provides easy and convenient passage, likewise the Rishus Harabim elsewhere needs to conform to that configuration. Let's take a look at Rashi, 4 lines from the top. Malus umarda shabuka amris. This is what Abaye is saying. Perhaps he's speaking about the steep hills and inclines. She'ein chayav aleim mishum Rishus Harabim. Why? L'nicha drisa detu. It's not easy to walk on them. V'leihave Rishus Harabim. Rav Dimi responded, Karkafna bala golgot kolaymar. Adam chashay, a prominent person, amudei shabei samedash Rabbi Yechanan. You were there when he said this. You were able to clarify it exactly the way it was said. And the reason is, She'ena kediglei midbar, it doesn't resemble the encampment in the midbar. The eretz chalaka was smooth ground. She'anan mashva isan. Rashi brings that the Chazal tell us that the anan, amud anan, the cloud would straighten out, smooth out the land, the ground where they traveled. So the Rishus Harabim provided easy and convenient access. Likewise, the Rishus Harabim elsewhere is all considered to be free, unrestricted area, easy to walk on. Only that is Rishus Harabim. But when we have these malus and morders, these steep hills and valleys and inclines, they don't provide convenient passageway, and therefore they're not considered to be a Rishus Harabim. At this point in the Gemara, it seems like it's not specific to Eretz Yisrael, but he merely cited Eretz Yisrael because it's typical that in Eretz Yisrael we find these malus and morders which are too steep to be considered Rishus Harabim. Continues the Gemara, Boimnei Rochava Mirav. So here's the following question of Rav. Tail, if you have a hill, a mound, a tall mound, hamislakit, asora metoch arba. You have this tail in Rishus Harabim, which rises steeply. It rises 10 tefachim, mislakit asora metoch arba, within 4 ames. So if you're walking up this hill, once you reach 4 ames, you've already risen, already gone up, climbed 10 tefachim, which is considered to be a steep incline, and is considered to be actually a mechitza in Rishus Harabim. So ordinarily, we consider this a Rishus Hayachid, on top of this hill. Now what happens if there are Rabbim that are actually boikim by it? Rabbim boikim by it, they're using this area, they're going right through it. Either they're going up the hill or crossing over it. In any case, it's not a separated area. It's actually part of the access route of the public. So does that change the status? Does that make it Rishus Harabim? Chayav and olav Rishus Harabim? Or ain't chayav and olav? Do we regard it as Rishus Harabim or not? Does the fact that the public are trespassing through this area change the halacha or not? Explains the Gemara. I'll leave it to Rabban like Tiboilach. Now, according to the Rabban who maintain that the mechitza can resist the Rabbim, even the Pasi Berois can resist the fact that the pedestrians are accessing through them, they maintain their sheyachet status. There's no question. Of course, certainly in this case, this Teila Maslachid will still retain its sheyachet status. Why? Hashta. Now, Umma Hasam. The Nichat Hashmishte, certainly over there by the Pasi Berois, which is a flat area. The Nichat Hashmishte, its use, Hashmishte, its use is Nicha. It's a convenient use. Amir Rabban, nevertheless, Rabban maintained Lo Yasu Rabbim, Umvatel Lo Mechitzah. Rabban doesn't have the ability, the Rabbim don't have the ability to Umvatel those Mechitzahs. Despite the fact that it's easy to walk through. Hacha, certainly in this case, Lo Nichat Hashmishte, its use is not convenient. Going up this steep mound, it's not a convenient walkthrough. Certainly, of course, like Koshkin, of course, Rabban would maintain that Ram don't have the ability to turn this into a public access route into a din of Shesarab. There's no question, because the Rabbanon, this retains its Shechat status. I'll leave it to Rabbi Yehuda. The question will apply according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that when we have the Rabbim who are accessing through the Pasi Berois, since it's not really a properly constructed mechitza, it's not really a fully enclosed area, he maintains the Rabbim have the ability to move out those mechitzas. So the question will be, does Rabbi Yehuda maintain that halacha in this case as well or not? What is the halacha? Hasam over there by the Pasi Berois, who the nichat hashmishte. Since it provides a convenient access route, it's flat ground, perhaps that turns into Rishus Rabbim. As opposed to our case, hacha over here, with lo nichat hashmishte. Since it does not provide easy access, lo yasu Rabbim matam chitzasa, the Rabbim will not have the ability to turn this into a Rishus Rabbim to be matam chitz. No, perhaps there's no reason to differentiate. Fact is, the Rabbim are walking through it. It's not really a properly enclosed area. They can turn this into Rishus Rabbim. Amarlei. So Rava responded, Chayovin, yes, there are chayiv, meaning we treat this as a Rishus Rabbim. According to Rabbi Rechava continued asking, even if it's such a steep incline that you have to climb up with a rope, rappel up with a rope, is that also considered to be a Rishus Rabbim due to the fact that the Rabbim happened to be walking through it? It's such an inconvenient route. Rava responded, yes, even in this case. Even if it's such a steep incline, it's now a passageway of Mali's Beis Mar where one person at a time could only walk through there. Such a steep, narrow area, is that also considered a Rishus Rabbim due to the fact that the public are accessing this route? Rava responded, yes, certainly, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it turns into Rishus Rabbim, they are mavatul the mechitzas. Eisvei, so Rechava asked him a kasha from the halacha where it seems that this is not the case. Even when we have the Rabbim coming through this area, if it's not a convenient route, they don't turn it into Rishus Rabbim. Chotzer sharabim nichnas labezu v'yotzim zu. We have a courtyard in a closed area, which features many entranceways, and the Rabbim are walking in and out of the area. What is the halacha of this chotzer? So number one, Rishus Rabbim l'tumah. When it comes to tumah, there's a suffix whether one becomes tumah. We know that if this happens in a public area, in Rishus Rabbim, we say the suffix is tahir. Now, the determination of Rishus Rabbim that pertaining to tumah is different than Shabbos. Tumah depends on whether it's a private area or public area. This chatzar, although it's fully enclosed, has mechitzas all around. When it comes to tumah, it's a public area, therefore it has a din of Rishus Rabbim for tumah. That's number one. When it comes to Shabbos, it's an entirely different story. Or Shesayachad the Shabbos. Since it's an enclosed area, it has a din of Shesayachad. Despite the fact it's being accessed by the public. Whose opinion, whose shita is being reflected in this price? Ilaim Rabbanon, shall we say it's the Rabbanon? That hold, generally speaking, the Rabbim don't have the ability to mevatel mechitza. Says, well, it can't be it's the Rabbanon. There wouldn't be a chiddush here. Hashta now, umahosam denichat hashmishte. Certainly in the case of the Pasi Berois where it presents a convenient walkthrough, denichat hashmishte, still and all, Ami Rabbanon lo yasu Rabbim matum chitzas. Rabbanon maintained the Rabbim can't break the mechitza. Hach, in our case, lo nichat hashmishte, its use is not easy and convenient. Rashi says there are some gidudim on the floor, there are some structural remnants, at the entranceway, so it doesn't provide easy access. Like Koshkain, certainly, of course. In this case, the Rabbin will not have the ability to negate those mechitzas. There's no reason for the Brisa to give us this halacha. It's so pashut. It's self-evident from the halacha of our Mishnah. Ela Rabbi Yehudi, apparently this Brisa is reflecting Rabbi Yehuda's shit and telling us that Rabbi Yehuda only holds that the Rabbin can be matal mechitza when it's easy access. But when it's an inconvenient route, such as in this case of the Chatzar, they will not negate the mechitzas. Says more La'olam Rabbanan, certainly the Brisa is Rabbanan. Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Rabbin will be matal mechitzas even in this case. What's the chiddush? What's the point of the Brisa? Which is Ram L'Tumah Tzrichalei. The point of the Brisa is to teach us this chiddush. Now when it comes to Tumah, we regard it as a Ram because it's a public area, despite the fact that when it comes to Shabbos, it is a Rishus HaYachid. So this contrast between Shabbos and Tumah, that's the point of the Brisa. But certainly, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbim can not be Mavatal, perhaps Rabbim can be Mavatal Mechitza, even when it's an inconvenient passageway. Toshma, let's bring a raya from the next halach. It's a Mishnah which says, Mavoyes HaMefaloshes. If we have these open-ended alleyways, meaning a mechitza on either side, but it is stretching from one Rosh Ram to the other, so it only has two mechitzas. Mavoyes HaMefaloshes, bib boros, if they're in a pit, ubesichen, these long and narrow pits, uma'aros, inside the cave, Rosh Hashanah, the Shabbos, Rosh Ram l'Tumah. So when it comes to Tumah, it's a public area, it's Rosh Hashanah. When it comes to Shabbos, it's considered to be fully enclosed, and is Rosh Hashanah. Says Gemara, what do you mean Mavoyes HaMefaloshes is bib boros? Bib boros hakadayit, how can you think we have an alleyway inside a pit? Ella rather, lib boros. The Mishnah means that we have the alleyways which are open to the boros. Meaning we have a case where we have a wall on either side, with an alleyway in between, stretching from one Rosh Hashanah on one side to Rosh Hashanah on the other side. And at the end of that alleyway, we have a pit in the ground, which is considered to be a mechitza, it's 10 tefachim deep. And that blocks off, so to speak, the maveh from Rosh Hashanah. It creates an enclosure on three sides. Now, there's still some access from the maveh to Rosh Hashanah, even on the bur side, because there's still some space. There's a ridge on the side of the bur, which allows one to walk through, although it's not so safe there, so it's made for the strong and brave, but technically you can walk through it. So that's the case here. We have the maveh, which is mefulosh to the bur, and the Mishnah says, Rosh Hashanah l'Shabbos, Rosh Hashanah l'Tumah. When it comes to Tumah, this maveh is a publicly accessed area. It's considered Rishus HaRabim. When it comes to Shabbos, we regard this maveh as an enclosed maveh because it's considered to be surrounded on mechitzas on three sides, despite the fact that people can get through that mechitza of the bar. Says Ramani, whose shita is being represented in this Mishnah? Ilay Rabbanan, shall we say it's the Rabbanan? And the Mishnah is telling us, despite the fact that there are rabbim coming through this maveh, going from one Rosh Hashanah to the other, it still holds its own ground. It retains its Rosh Hashanah status. There's no need for us to tell us that according to Rabbanan, that is the halacha. Why? Hashta now. Certainly, when it comes to the Pasei Berois, where it's providing an easy, convenient access route. It's on flat ground, it's safe and sound, there's no reason to hesitate walking through those Pasei Berois. Nevertheless, Rabbanan tell us, Amri loy asur Rabbim vatla. The Rabbim have no ability to vat those mechitzas. Mechitzas hold firm ground. Mechitzas are stronger than public traffic. Hacha. Certainly in this case, loy nichat hashmishte doesn't provide convenient use and access. Walking beside that bar is not meant for your tender-hearted person. So it's not nichat hashmishte. Loy kolshkein. Certainly, of course, in this case, the Rabbim's access will not affect a negation on the mechitzas. Of course, the mechitzas will hold their own, and it will be considered proper shayach. There's no need for us to even talk about it. Elav Rabbi Yehudi, apparently, this mission is reflecting Rabbi Yehuda's shita, and they're teaching us that according to Rabbi Yehuda, if it doesn't provide an easy, convenient passageway for the Rabbim, they are not going to be invatal the mechitzah. Says Malay, Rabbanan. Perhaps this mission is Rabbanan. What is the chiddush here? The mission is simply coming to inform us despite the fact that when it comes to Shabbos, which works with the concept of mechitzas, is considered shesayachid. When it comes to Tumah, we work with whether or not this place is a private area. And therefore, this Maveh, since it's publicly accessed, is considered to be a shesarabim for Tumah. But perhaps according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Rabbim will be mavatal the mechitza in accordance with what Rava told us. Toshma, we have another raya, shvilei bez gilgol v'chayetzben. We have these steep paths called shvilei bez gilgol v'chayetzben, or something which is similar to that. Rosh Hashanah the Shabbos, shesarabim l'tumah. When it comes to Shabbos, it's shesayachid because it's too steep to be considered a shesarabim. When it comes to Tumah, it's a publicly accessed area. It's not a private area. Therefore, if one has a suffix Tumah, he's tar. Ve'ezo shvili beis gil. What is an example? What determines this type of shvili beis gilgal? What is it? Amri ve'Rab Yanai. Kol sheina eved yochal litel sa. If it's so steep that the servant doesn't have the ability to hold on to this measure of sa shel chitin, ve'yoris lefnei sardiot, to take it and run before his master, for his boss, it's too steep for that. That is not considered to be any longer Rishus HaRabbim, rather regarded as Shesayachid. Says Ramani, whose Shita is being discussed here? Ilim Rabbanon. How can you say it's Rabbanon? Hashta. Certainly, if we find when it comes to the Pasi Berois, where it's an easy access route for the Rabbim, Amir Rabbanon, Leosu Rabbim, the Rabbim don't have the ability to matam mechitzis. Hach, in this case, Lanichat Hashmishta. It's not a convenient access route. It's a steep hill. It's a steep path. Certainly, of course, the Rabbanon, the Rabbim, despite the fact that they're using this path, will not turn into Shesarabim, according to the Shittas Rabbanon. There's no need to even discuss it. El Lav Rabbi Yehudi. Apparently, this halacha is following Shittas Rabbi Yehuda and telling us that a place which doesn't provide easy, convenient access for the Rabbim is not considered to be Shesarabim. So there's a raya against Rava. So Rava responded, this is different. Shvilei beis gilgul ka'amris. Are you speaking about this steep shvilim, these pathways called beis gilgul, which is in Eretz Yisrael? Yeshua oiv Yisrael haya. I'll tell you why it's not Eretz Yisrael, because Yeshua was an oiv Yisrael. Omad v'tikel lehem d'rochem v'srati. So when he divided Eretz Yisrael, he went ahead and established roadways and highways. Any place where the area provided easy, convenient access for the public, he handed it over to the public to be used for Shesarabim. Whenever we have a road which is not a convenient access route, such as these Shvileis beis gilgul, which are steep and hard to access, these roads were not given over to the Rabbim. Masrul Yachid. He handed it over to the Yachid individual. It does not have a din of Shesarabim. This is specific in Eretz Yisrael. Yeshua established the roadway. So roadway, which was a convenient roadway, he gave it to the Rabbim. But something was inconvenient, such as Shvili beis gilgul, he gave it over to the Yachid, and therefore, it doesn't have a din of Rishus HaRabbim. But generally speaking, outside Eretz Yisrael, even an area which is not conveniently accessed, according to Rabbi Yehuda, certainly the Rabbim will be involved in the mechitzas and turn it into Rishus HaRabbim. So in summary, we discussed what makes a Rosh Hashanah. According to the Chachamim, 3 mechitzas, or the Pasi Berois, which provide Shem Dal mechitzas. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you only need 2 mechitzas, or the Pasi Berois, which provide Shem Dal mechitzas. Now, what if we have the Derech HaRabbim, which is intersecting through these mechitzas? According to the Chachamim, the Rabbim don't have the ability to mibata mechitzas. Period. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it depends what type of mechitzas we're speaking about. If we have 2 properly constructed mechitzas, complete mechitzas, certainly the Rabbim will not have the ability to mivatal that. But if we only have partial mechitzas, such as the Pasi Berois, which only present themselves as Shem Dal mechitzas, you have that configuration of 4 mechitzas, you have 4 corners. That's not properly constructed mechitzas, those aren't complete mechitzas, and the Rabbim have the ability to mivatal those mechitzas. Rava concluded for us, even in the case where it's Leinichat Hashmishtei, when the public doesn't really have a convenient access route through these mechitzas, nevertheless, according to Rabbi Yehuda, they are going to be mivatal those mechitzas. The Gemara concluded that all agree, when we have these steep passageways in Eretz Yisrael, those Shvilei beis gilgul, those are certainly considered to be Rosh Hashanah because Yeshua gave it to the Yachid rather than to the Rabbim. And now, based on this, it would seem very clear that when Rabbi Yechon told us earlier that those steep hills in Eretz Yisrael are not considered Surabim, he was referring specifically to Eretz Yisrael, and based on this very reason. Okay, time for a brief chazara of today's daf. We began discussing the schos that a person merits when he is moise nefesh v'Torah. We learned that Hashem provides the payment for the mitzvahs to Rishonim in this world, but for tzaddikim it is reserved for the next world. Hayom la'asoisam umachar l'kabel scharim. Now, what is the size of the enclosure within the Pasei Berois? We have a machlekes. According to Rabbanan, it could be as large as you want. According to Shimon Lazar, the bar itself needs to be 2 sa by 2 sa, has to be square, and you can add to that the space next to the bar and surround the entire area with the pasim. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the bar itself needs to be 2 sa, and even if it's long and narrow, it's okay. Now, when we speak about 2 sa, are we including the area beside the bar? So altogether, it needs a total no more than 2 sa, or perhaps the bar itself can equal beis asayim, and you can also add to that the space next to the bar, and we leave it unresolved. We concluded regarding what makes a Rosh Hashanah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, 2 mechitzas. According to Rabbanan, 3 mechitzas. According to the Chachamim, the Rabbim never have the ability to be mevatel the mechitzas of Rosh Hashanah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, sometimes they do.